Hello, everyone. Boy, oh boy, here we are, ready to go live. Welcome to Wednesday. It's Hump Day. I know some people don't like when you say Hump Day, but that's
like my friend Anita Krishna in Canada, she worked for a global news or a big news network. She started to ask just regular questions. She's like, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? We're a news organization. Isn't that what we do as a news organization? And she got fired for that, of course.
Crazy.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Here I am. I really never get sick of that intro. Thank you so much to Jimmy Dore for even mentioning that. It was a great honor to even be mentioned. Welcome to Wednesday. Welcome to this show today. I have a great show lined up for you and a fantastic guest that I can't wait to talk to. She's waiting in the wings. I'll introduce her in a second. But a couple of things. If you're new to my channel, as you saw in the intro, I worked for Global News for like 20 some odd years. And then when I started to question the narrative of the world event, I hear on YouTube, sometimes you can't even say the pandemic, but I've said it for years. But the world event, if we're going to call it that, when I started to question that narrative, I was shot down. I was like bullied. I was sent emails saying, Anita, please stop talking about COVID, which is pretty rich coming from Global News when all we did was scare the heck out of everybody and misinform them without a doubt. So anytime you watch them, I say this any chance I can get, because I want people to know that they were misled. And it was a complete and utter disappointment of my life to see the reporting that we did. All of a sudden, we did not know how to report on the other side of the story. Okay, so that's my backstory. So if you're new here, welcome. Couple of things going on. If you didn't get a chance, question period happened today. And, Mark Carney is not a big fan of question period. He's going to not participate it going forward. Even Trudeau did on Wednesdays. If you happen to catch it, I would recommend watching it, because the Conservatives came to play. They were not messing around. They were absolutely on fire today. Melissa Lantsman, Andrew Scheer, just amazing. And this other, I might do a video on it later, this other MP from Alberta, I think her name was Shannon Stubbs. Oh, she was on fire. It was just well worth watching. But Carney answered 2 questions and then disappeared. I don't know how you can get away with that. I don't know how you can do that, but he can get away with these things with impunity, it seems like, and that's okay. We'll see if the media actually rails him on it. I don't know if they will. But anyway, yesterday, the king was here. He's good friends with the king, obviously. Like when we say he has friends in high places, undoubtedly he has friends in high places. And he quite openly asked the king to come, and the king came to open parliament. And, a lot of people don't feel the same way about the monarchy these days. They don't feel the same way about a lot of things. Musicians, Hollywood, celebrities, we don't regard them in the same way the more we learn. And I know a lot of people are quite upset about having the king come and sort of upset at the whole display. I'm going to play this one clip just to start things off, just because it just felt so bizarre. Here it is.
This land acknowledgement is a recognition of shared history as a nation, while continuing to deepen my own understanding. It is my great hope that in each of your communities and collectively as a country, a path is found toward truth and reconciliation in both word and deed. This is my 20th visit to Canada, spread over the course of more than half a century. and my first as sovereign. As I've said before, every time I come to Canada, a little more of Canada seeps into my bloodstream, and from there, straight to my heart.
Okay. I played that clip for my son when he came home from school because that's what I just kind of had rolling on my phone. And he was like, that is bizarre. And he's half British. He really loves Britain. And our in-laws are British. My mother-in-law looks exactly like Camilla. And even he was like, that's a bit weird. It was a bit strange, but I wasn't as bothered by the pomp and the circumstances. I know that a lot of people were. What I did find completely peculiar is that someone just sort of said to the king, take this speech and read it. And basically that's what he did. And he read what was written for him. And to me, a lot of it was sort of platforms that the conservatives had run on, cutting the GST and the things that he talked about in that speech. It was the most bizarre thing in the world to watch the king talk about GST and home prices, like as if this is something he has any familiarity with whatsoever. It was completely bizarre. And I wasn't sure if after all this that Pierre was there, but Pierre was there. Actually, I have a little shot of him in this next clip I'm going to play, which I found so bizarre. The king talking about the GST.
And the values the world respects. Canada is ready to lead.
The government is guided by its conviction that the economy is only truly strong when it serves everyone. Many Canadians are struggling to get ahead. The government is responding, reducing middle-class taxes and saving two-income families up to $840 a year. It will cut the GST on homes at or under $1 million for first-time home buyers, delivering savings of up to $50,000. And it will lower the GST on homes between $1 million and $1.5 million.
Almost like he's just about to say, what is this home buying you speak of? Like, it just seemed like I don't think he's ever bought a home, but just it was very bizarre to see him talk about that. But I'm not going to waste any more time on my own. I'm going to bring in my guest. My guest is Kris Sims. She's the Alberta director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Kris, hello. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Anita. Great to join you.
It was so nice to talk to you. I talked to you on the phone just a little bit this morning, and you and I have very similar backgrounds, and all the things that I had talked about, you totally understood. You
Yep.
just, you know the game, like you know the industry, you know the business, and it was really nice to
I
talk
think we
to you
went
this
to the
morning.
same trade college for journalism in Burnaby. So
We did.
Did you go to BCIT?
I did for a bit, but then for some reason I applied to Ryerson because I had a friend in Toronto, and I went to the RTA, the radio and
Oh.
television program in Ryerson. I know. And at the time that I worked at Global, the only two people that were RTA grads, everybody was BCIT, was
Yeah.
Tony Parsons and Glenn and Glenn
Tony
Elliott.
Parsons was out of that's so interesting. My first internship job. Sorry, folks, for the inside
No,
baseball
go.
here.
No, go.
My
I
first
love it.
internship job outside of BCIT when I was still a student was in BCTV, when it was still called BCTV with the dogwood and everything like that. And I
Yep.
got to see Tony Parsons in person. He's much shorter than he looked like he was on TV.
Yeah, I always thought he was lovely.
He was
worked
always
at
so
the-
nice. He brought his
He's
Cocker
so nice.
Spaniels to work. Yeah.
Time the dog sat under the desk. The dog was quiet as a mouse, so well behaved, and he was a nice man. And I have to say, all those people, the old school people like Wayne Cox, Pamela Martin, Tony Parsons, and Bill Good, were so kind, so
Yeah.
professional. I didn't see any arrogance. But the younger generations that came up, I found them to be more arrogant, very full of themselves.
I found that the old guard had more hands-on experience talking to normal people all the time. As we got along in our years, more and more, not all, of course, but more and more journalism grads are what I would describe as paper grads.
Mhm.
They had the theory, but they were often afraid to talk to people, which
Yeah.
isn't a great thing to have for journalism. It's interesting you kicked off with the throne speech,
Yeah.
because I'm a rare bird within the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, in that I'm somewhat of a monarchist. And
Mm.
so I found it really interesting, like politics aside,
Mhm.
teams and red team, blue team, all that aside, I thought it was a communications win for Carney to get His Majesty the King to come read the throne speech. It was a smart thing to do. It was strong visuals. It kind of does a big reset within Canada. It makes us look distinguished and different, which we are. We are a constitutional monarchy. The
Mhm.
king is our head of state. And that's
Mhm.
literally why it's called the throne speech, because it's supposed to be delivered by the sovereign. That's why the Senate chamber is red. That is why it's called the royal chamber. The
Mhm.
House of Commons has green carpeting to mimic the grass from the hills where the commoners back in the day in England would have gathered to meet. That is literally why it's called the House of Commons. And that shot you showed where they're all kind of gathered behind the bar there, that's because those are members of the House of Commons. They are
Right.
not supposed to go past the bar. And same thing happens too when they have a huge committee of a whole or a big ceremony in the House of Commons. The senators don't go past the bar. So very interesting. They gather in the foyer in the vestibule. So there's a lot of symbolism and history attached to what King Charles was doing there.
Yes, and I mean, people might roast us in the comments, and that's okay. I don't care. I actually enjoyed watching you might call it pomp and circumstance, but I enjoyed watching the ceremonial parts of it. I really did, and there's something about tradition and
Mhm.
sort of maybe decorum
Mhm.
that the royals brought, and even just his accent and the way like my family's British, right? My children are British, so there's just something that resonates to me, but I like the formality of it.
Mhm.
And yes, you can't deny we are part of the Commonwealth. He is our head of state, like
Yes.
it or not. And so, but a lot of people, their stomach kind of turned. I heard a lot of podcasters saying, well, what's the point of this? Why do we have this? Well, that's exactly why. You just explained it. We're not American,
No, we are not
but
a
yeah,
republic. We are a
right.
constitutional monarchy. And I will say, I have
Yeah.
a lot of sympathy and understanding for the folks that are like, really? I mean, I was raised in the woods of British Columbia, working class. Like, nobody's inviting me to Buckingham Palace anytime soon. Like, I get you. I love referendums. I want recall legislation. I think government should be small enough that you can drown it in the bathtub if you need to, the way Grover Norquist had said. I love representative democracy. I'm all the way there.
Yeah.
However, I'm also a big history buff. And
Yeah.
I do think that continuity and symbolism matters. And
Yeah.
in some of these cases, not all, some of these cases, the actions and the symbolism and the language, and especially the outfits that you'll see, the uniforms
Mhm.
you'll see at things like a royal funeral or a royal wedding, some of those traditions go back 1,000 years. So that's a big deal. And for my dear friends who, again, are like gristling at this, I totally understand and I do hear you. I know I'm split personality on this. I'm totally mixed on this issue. I do think there's a way to do this that doesn't break the bank. And to that point, we are filing a lot of FOIs, Freedom of Information requests,
Right.
to make
Yes.
sure that this was not ridiculously expensive. For
Well,
example,
yeah.
we hope Justin Trudeau did not spend $6,000 per night at a hotel room like he did during Her Majesty the Queen's funeral.
Yes, yes, he did. And somebody in the comments, put in here, so you're okay with the $10 million story time? Like, but and some people are very upset in the comments already. But like, yeah, they don't like this, but you get it, and I get it, we get it, and
It's
at the
okay to
moment,
not like it. I
it's
totally respect why
okay.
they don't like it at all. And,
Exactly.
that's one of the reasons why, for example, at the Taxpayers Federation, we go after the spending at the Governor General's house. It's an outrageous amount of money that we're spending on the
Yeah.
Governor General. This could be a very simple, like kind of a honorific sort of title for somebody to hold. We do not need to spend a ton of money on this system, but that doesn't mean we have to absolutely overthrow that system. And again, you need to ask yourself what you want to replace it with. And if somebody says, oh, well, a republic, you really think that the State of the Union address isn't this sort of pomp and circumstance? Really? What about the swearing in, the inauguration ceremony? I saw an awful lot of bunting and a lot of trumpets and a lot of cannons. So human beings do require these sorts of, I would say, ceremonies, symbols, right? Artifacts, continuity, history. The question is making sure the costs stay down and keeping the power in check, which
That's
of
right.
course can run rampant. Yep.
That's right. We feel like we're living in a banana republic, that's for sure. I'm just going to show just one more little clip of the plane and a
Okay.
bit and the motorcade. You hear that? And people are yelling, shame on you. These people are very upset. And you really got to say something about the hypocrisy of this. You know, we don't know the price tag yet, right? 'Cause
No,
you have
not
to,
yet.
you
We're
have
gonna
to
find out
that
though. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yep.
will find out. But the plane and the motorcade of cars, and they have the audacity to nag us about our carbon
Oh,
output.
do not get me started. In fact, we're having a show. Why not get me started? Oh yeah,
Yeah.
there is so much hypocrisy here. I could choke a horse. Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and defend the king as a person or his opinions. He's right in there, and unfortunately, so is William, talking about things like carbon footprints. No, and yeah, I don't trust me, folks. I'm not losing sight of the fact that 50% of Canadians are within $200 every month of not being able to make the minimum payments on all of their bills. So
Yeah.
I get it. I'm not saying that he's in there as the common man. I'm just describing our system of government. And as Thomas Sowell would ask,
Right.
if you want to replace it, you have to ask yourself with what, right? So you ask yourself the three questions that Dr. Sowell would ask: compared to what, at what cost, and what hard evidence do you have? There may be really good answers to all three of those things. So that's all.
Yeah,
I'm
we
saying.
we want to replace it, but we're not there. We're
With
not
what?
there. Yeah,
Exactly.
with what? And who's going to organize it and how is it going to come about? You know, you hear people talk about co-ops and this and that and what. Well, we're not there yet. This is what we're kind of stuck with right now. But it's a good question, and it's something that I think people want to examine. But
Sure.
it's a big broad question.
Get
Any
her
other?
and protest every day. Honestly, stand out there and protest every day. That is your right. I would
Yeah.
argue it's your duty in some cases. I think it's great.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And so before we move on to another subject, you kind of enjoyed it. Did you not enjoyed it, but you took it for what it was, it sounds like, right?
I actually didn't watch it. I read it.
Oh,
So
you're a reader. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, how do I put this? Based on to exactly the point that some of the commenters are making, I'm sure, based on all of the nonsense that has been done to working people from Ottawa lately,
Yeah.
it's hard to stomach listening to some of them talk and watching some of them move around in that parliamentary precinct. So
Yeah.
the fact that so many people are fighting just to get by, the fact
Mhm.
that this Liberal government has doubled the debt in less than 10 years, the fact that it is trying to crush freedom of expression through censorship in many new ways, there's a million things that I can't stand it. So
Yeah.
I keep up on it and I read it. So I actually didn't watch the official ceremonies. If I need to scratch that itch, I mean, I'll watch The Crown in my own time.
Exactly. Now, one of the things I want to talk to you about, you're very knowledgeable about bills, governments. Okay, maybe let's talk a little bit just about what do you know in general? We all know what CBC gets paid for government funded media. Those numbers are quite transparent. For me, having worked at Global, I knew that they were beating down on dissent. They were not happy with me when I'd present the counter story. Which is what a job of a journalist is. Not that I was a director, as you know, but I
Mhm.
was aghast. I was like beside myself that there were so many obvious things that were so easy to find that we weren't reporting. And it was the first time I'd ever been told to shut up. I just couldn't believe it. And so then people then started to say, when the backlash happened, bought and paid for, you're bought and paid for media. And people within Global were like, no, we're not. It's because we don't know how money changes hands above us, what
Mhm.
tax breaks they get, what I don't know what happened, but I know somebody got to my bosses from above. What can you say about media funding or government funding in the media as you
Outside
know
of
it?
the CBC?
Yeah.
Okay.
If yeah.
So just very quickly, as of right now, the CBC gets about $1.4 billion per year from the government. That is taxpayers' money. To put $1.4 billion into perspective, that could otherwise pay the full-time salaries of about 7,000 cops and about 7,000 paramedics combined
Oh,
per year. So
yeah.
that's the kind of cash we're talking about here. I'm trying to read all the
I know.
comments that are popping
I
up.
know.
Nice, love this. So that's where the CBC is at. That aside,
Yeah.
there is now this, how do I put this nicely? A cluster of direct funding, tax credits, subsidies, blah, 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 blah. Kind of
Right.
hush that is going to other media. So media that is not the CBC. The question about who is getting what and how much is
Yeah.
murky, right? The answer to that is murky. Short answer is we're not exactly sure. The longer answer is it's about the pot of money, okay, that's there, the bubbling stew I just described, is about $500 million, about $500 million that goes to other media. And the great folks at Blacklock's Reporter love their work. They're completely independent, old salty dogs on journalism, and they take that as a compliment. They do great investigative work. They got documents where they were able to work out the math. So if a news media corporation is taking government money and is part of the bailout or the funding programs, depending on what you want to call it, on average, per employee, it's equivalent to now closing in on about $29,000 per employee.
Mhm.
And you've worked in the field. You know what kind of a difference 29 grand per person is going to make to your paycheck.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter if it's $10 or $29,000. Journalists must not be paid by the government. The fact I need to say that out loud is kind of embarrassing because it's such an obvious conflict of interest. As a journalist, it doesn't matter if your own personal opinions are left or right or green. It doesn't matter. We all are human. We all have them, of course. There's no such thing as a robotic, objective journalist. Okay. You're a human being. Just going to journalism school doesn't grant you the omniscience of being objective, by the way. You have to check your biases. You have to check for balance. You have to make sure you get both sides or all three sides of a story, right? All those basics that we were taught in school. So the problem here is that the moment you are dependent upon the government for your job, you cannot do your job clearly. You can't. So people often say that journalists are tasked with a calling of speaking truth to power.
Mhm.
Cannot do that if you are counting on the powerful government for your paycheck.
Yeah.
It is a direct and obvious conflict of interest. So, long story short, for your question, it's around $29,000 per media company employee. We don't know exactly how much and who gets what. I'm in the middle of putting together a report on this topic.
Yeah, I know that my union didn't support me, and I know that I think the government decided Unifor decided what media companies would get funding. There was some sort of deal worked out there. I know there's tax breaks. I know that Global is owned by Chorus. Chorus has deals with China, like they make TV shows, and there's a lot of kids shows and all kinds of things. I mean, there's a trickle down thing that I don't know. I just know that they did not want the truth to come out when it came to the world event, and that kind of shattered my illusions of journalism.
Well, there's a panel, right? There
Mhm.
was a panel of usually retired CBC journalists and academics, okay, who were deciding what was a qualified news agency for this government largesse and which was not. Like
Yeah. Oh,
ladling out this money. Oh yeah. It's a real
yeah.
panel full of real people. Most of them, last I checked, I did 2 different big deep dives on it. Both times they were dominated by I would call them CBC types.
Oh,
So the
great.
types who feel totally fine with government funded news corporations. I won't call it journalism. Like, I'll put it this way. It doesn't matter if the journalist is left wing or right wing. People are like, oh, I don't like the CBC because they're woke or they're left. Okay, fine. You can have that opinion. That's not the point. The point is, journalists should not be paid by the government, period. It wouldn't matter if, God rest his soul, Rex Murphy were delivering the news and Don Cherry was delivering the sports. Would I find that entertaining? Yeah. Would it be ethical for them to still call themselves journalists? No. No. You should not take government funding if you are a journalist.
Yeah, and it's a big problem because on Chorus Radio, you'll hear Pfizer ads. We don't have we do here. We have ads like Martha Stewart will do an ad.
I thought we didn't have that kind of advertising in Canada.
We like in the US, they always have those drug ads with the may cause this, that. Yeah. But we don't have that on TV, but we have it on radio. So you won't see like a pharmaceutical ad on TV, but we do on radio because I hear it on the radio. When I'm driving around, I'll hear those Pfizer ads. So that's part of it too. So there's a lot of pharmaceuticals. So they're buying ads that those companies are paying Chorus in general. At least that's, because they're
as far as the Taxpayers Federation goes, we don't want tax dollars going there. If a company
we don't want tax, that's right.
Ads, like fill your boots. Seriously.
That's true. That's true. And that's true. And it's time for, I don't want a penny of my tax money going to the CBC anymore or any type of funding for the media if this is going to be the outcome. If you think you are so good, get subscribers like every other YouTuber has to or every other independent and let people pay for the service. You think all of us people who write on Substack or have YouTube channels, you think that anybody gives us a penny for what we do? No, you have to scratch around for it. And they make it so hard here for you to get ahead, which brings me to the next part of what we're talking about is all censorship stuff. Now we're going to talk about Bill C11 and C63, but I want to just bring up this story that made a little bit of news. Now you and I talked a little bit about it this morning, and it was this channel called Real Talk Politics. And I'm going to just read this little part, but you said something interesting earlier, but Canadian YouTube channel that was dominating the platform during the country's recent election has vanished after the state-funded Canadian Broadcasting Corporation reached out to YouTube and branded it a content farm in a Friday hit piece. The channel, Real Talk Politics, had over 300,000 subscribers and more than 70 million views in the month of April, according to viewstats.com, making it the third most viewed Canadian news and politics channel over the past 3 months. The funny thing is you and I hadn't really heard of this channel.
Yeah, which surprised me, not to be all crazy narcissist or anything, but I'm in the field, right? I follow journalism and politics, especially online independent media, like a lot. And so I was kind of surprised that I hadn't heard of this channel. But then I went and read from the CBC's perspective. I read the CBC's print story. And I kept on. Now, again, I don't know the details of the story, but let's just speak about it even theoretically. I kept reading the story, wondering where the there was. Like, I'm reading it going, and like, I was waiting to hear the punchline as to what violation this channel had supposedly committed. And I never found it. There were some elements there saying perhaps they had used an AI generated joke by former US President Ronald Reagan, but that was it. What I was noticing, and I watched the video attached, again, this is CBC News, okay? Their outrage seemed to be that they were labeling this thing a content farm, and who cares? Who cares what the CBC is calling it?
They're a content farm themselves. CBC. Like, what do you think? What do you think a newscast is? It's the same formula day in, day out. It's a content farm. It's the same thing. I've worked on thousands of newscasts. It's always like, and Bob is down at the courthouse with the latest. So Bob, what have you got to say? Well, thanks, Tony. The judge ruled blah blah blah. Now back to you. It's a formula. It's a content formula. So they participate in that too if they can't see their own hypocrisy. But
honestly, like, let's break this down etymologically. Like, content is just stuff that is contained. Okay, farm
stuff
is where you produce things. Like, that's why it's called produce. No, I'm not. Like, seriously. So it was this kind of like looking down the nose tone, which is so classic of it's a content farm. Number one, who cares? what you're calling it.
Who cares? Everything is content. And if
Sure.
it's like they're trying to make up a slur.
And number two, they seemed sorry, I have to get this little cat dig in here. They seemed mystified as to the fact that people were watching this, so it was getting views, and it was making money.
I know.
Like, apparently those are two alien concepts, I guess, to these folks.
What
and so this is where, again, I'm reserving judgment on the cause and the outcome and all that because I don't know the details enough yet, and I'm still thinking there must be some weird catch to this. But what concerned me going forward is that this could be an indication of things to come, because folks might remember just on, I think it was February 20th, okay, it was before the election, that the then Heritage Minister, Pascale Saint-Onge, she had brought forth a big deep dive report on the future of the CBC. In that report, they made several recommendations. One of them was to increase its funding, meaning make taxpayers pay more for the CBC. And I did the math that if they did the full amount that they were recommending, like the maximum, it would bring annual funding for the CBC to about $2.4 or $2.5 billion.
Oh.
To give you an idea what kind of cash we're talking about there, that would pay the annual grocery bills of more than 150,000 Canadian families. All of it paid, families of 4, okay? That's the kind of cash. The other element, and again, this is the part where I'm checking the regulations. I'm going to do more of a deep dive into their study and their language they used. But the minister said something to the effect of, she would like to change the mandate of the CBC to include finding out what is and is not misinformation. Basically becoming an arbiter of truth for online content that Canadians see, hear, and share. Now, again, that's just something she verbalized. I don't have like the actual writing of the report in front of me at this moment. But if we continue down this path, then that kind of paints a bad picture when it comes to free expression, because we don't want some government bureaucrat becoming the arbiter of truth.
I do not want a group of people deciding what I can and can't see. I don't want a group of people deciding anything about my life. I'm an adult. I'll make my own decisions.
Yeah. Like just one sec. If people want to watch a 5-hour video of Santa Claus hanging out with the Easter Bunny, talking about like Roman politics, that's up to them.
That's up to them.
That's their choice. The notion that we would have bureaucrats deciding, well, that's technically not true, so we're taking this down. That's you're in crazy pants territory there. So hopefully we don't get there, but it is definitely something that we're keeping an eye on, because we're Taxpayers Federation fighters. We hand out golden pig statues to politicians who waste your money. We express ourselves and get thousands of other people to do it all the time. If we cannot express ourselves, we can't hold government to account. It's game over. So that's why we're fighting censorship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the biggest irony is that CBC, to me, was one of the biggest purveyors of misinformation, along with all the other mainstream media during that time. And they still do it. They still are biased. But let's have a quick look at what CBC had to say about this channel. And this morning when I talked to you, got me thinking about something. So I'm going to tell you what that is after this clip.
Democrats keep getting humiliated on national television.
Do you think a trans woman is a woman?
No. You've probably seen videos like this in your feeds before. They're confrontational and partisan.
If it hadn't been for the Democrats and the Biden administration.
This is one of the most popular Canada-based news accounts on YouTube. But it's not really news. It's more like what people call a content farm. We'll break down the formula that makes it so popular and try to find out who's behind this channel. Why would someone start a channel like this? Like, what's it for?
You know, it's for making money.
If you dig into this channel, you could see it has a clear formula. Here's the strategy. Take a clip of a confrontation between a conservative figure and a liberal. Focus on the moment where they humiliate, destroy, or humble that liberal. Add what seems to be an AI voiceover framing the confrontation.
This BLM activist is literally left speechless.
And keep it to a minute or so. This isn't original content. The videos are ripped from Senate hearings, university lectures, or TV shows. It's all part of a bigger trend.
The content farm can take many different forms, but these channels in particular do seem to be using the political content in particular and what they feel is going to drive the engagement.
And that's exactly.
Isn't that awful on so many levels? They're like, this isn't original. You know what it is? It's fair use. We take a clip from here, a clip for there. We do a little comment. That's all good. That's all well and good. It's what they do. I mean, they do that too. It's like they're trying to paint it with, even with the music in the background, like, this is such a bad thing. Look at them. They might actually make some money doing this.
Something somebody wants to watch. Like the entire time I was watching it, again, just taking off my CTF hat and putting on my journalism hat. Because I've worked in newsrooms like most of my life, including mainstream media newsrooms. The entire time I was watching it, I was saying, so
big deal. Yeah.
So like, if you don't want to watch that stuff, like I personally find it too jarring to have quick little clips. Like I'm old school, I'm Gen X. I like the 3-hour long deep dive conversations. Like, I think those are great. If that's not your cup of tea, don't watch it. Like, problem solved. So this is where I was scratching my head. And again, I am going to reserve judgment because it was so strange. There must be some other reason for this or whatever. So I have filed freedom of information requests with the CBC, trying to find out what emails were passed back and forth between themselves and YouTube.
That's right.
And this content creator, whoever that person or people are. We want to know what's going on. Like,
that's right. Oh,
it feels like we're not getting the whole story, and we'd like to know what's going on because, again, you are paying for this. Like, taxpayers are paying every single bit for what we just watched there, and we want to keep the CBC accountable. And what's interesting is that the CBC doesn't like sharing information. They black out information all the time. We have to drag them kicking and screaming to share information with taxpayers who fund them. So we'll find out what's going on here.
CBC don't even put comments on their YouTube channel. So you're trying to say you're the Canadian, you're broadcasting for the Canadian public? No, you're not. And at the end of that piece, that reporter who put it together goes, and if you know of any other channels you want us to have a look at, let us know, get in touch. So what, we're going to like go, oh, we don't like this channel, we don't like this channel, we're going to tell the CBC? So that's great that you put in a FOIA request for that. And another thing that I was thinking is that that maybe the CBC is just grooming us. Maybe this is all BS in a way. And they put this story out to be like, hey, get used to it. This is what we're doing. And we're doing this with impunity because the government is on our side. Mark Carney loves us. He's giving us more money. And so you heard this story about this one mega channel that got flushed down the toilet because we said so. Yeah, that's right. Get used to it. Us and our buddies at the CRTC, this is how it's going to go, Canada.
And
maybe it's that.
This is the problem when it comes to freedom of expression, because it has a chilling effect. It creates self-censorship, right?
100%. I can't even talk like a normal person on YouTube when I'm talking about what happened on a global, because I'm trying to self-censor myself, because I will shadow ban the channel and the channel of anybody that I guest on.
And this is again, it comes down to fundamentals. If we are able, so we are a grassroots, citizens-led organization that speaks for lower taxes, less waste, and accountable government, smaller accountable government. If groups like ours were not able to speak up, if we were not able to hold protests on Parliament Hill, if we could not hand out, like that's right there, that golden pig statue, if we couldn't hand out golden pig statues to politicians who waste your money in the worst possible manner, if we can't mock the king, then we don't have freedom of expression and we can't speak truth to power. And I would go to the mat for a left-wing oriented organization that was grassroots and trying to hold the government to account too. This is why we cannot have journalists on government payroll. Just imagine, for folks who are listening, who maybe they feel this way themselves and you're just watching because you don't like it or something. Maybe you have a sister-in-law who feels differently from you politically speaking. Put the shoe on the other foot, okay? Imagine that the person you dislike the most on the right, whoever that is, Pierre Poilievre or Maxime Bernier or whatever, imagine that person were prime minister. They then get a $1.4 billion media organization. Their government is funding the media now all of a sudden. How would you feel about that? Would you be okay with that? Would you want that right-wing conservative government deciding what you can see, hear, and share on the internet? I'll give you a personal example, okay? Well, now back, I'm dating myself, but back in the early 2000s, okay, it was shortly after 9/11, okay? I was working on Parliament Hill. I was a journalist, I was a staffer, I've had a ton of different jobs. And I remember distinctly, it was in the lead up to the invasion of Iraq, okay? It was not always, but it was largely, predominantly left of center or left-leaning groups who were opposed to this invasion. Again, not everybody, but I'm generalizing. It was generally speaking left-wing groups who were opposed then to this action. And back then, Canada was on the bubble. It was a big question. Will we go or will we not? Will we sit this one out or will we go in with the Americans? Then those grassroots groups and individuals and stuff, they all communicated usually using message boards, which were public. So this was before Facebook, okay? This is before Twitter was a big thing, okay? So that is how they publicly expressed themselves all the time. Sometimes they would have videos. They also had blogs. Remember those? And write them all the time. It was very public. That was the social media then. Imagine if the government had been able to shut that down or downgrade it so far that you couldn't see it. Those folks, those protesters, wouldn't have been able to communicate with themselves, and they wouldn't have been able to organize the huge anti-war protest that was on Parliament Hill. It was a huge protest there. And a few days later, then Prime Minister Jean Chrétien stood up and said, you know what, we're sitting this one out. We're not going. And that was likely influenced by the fact that there were thousands and thousands of people outside protesting. And I'm giving you this example because it's kind of an example of the shoe being on the other foot. Imagine if it were, kind of left of center groups that were being controlled and shut down, if the government had had the power to be able to stifle that expression. It's not a place you want to go. We want to be able to have fights in the public forum, right? We want to be able to use our facts and use our voices and get our arguments across.
Well, this is why people think we're crazy when we speak up. We're so oppressed. You tell your friend something, a fact, and they're like, well, I never heard that. So it didn't happen. All these things about the world event and whatever. If you tell them about things, they have no clue. They haven't heard anything. It didn't happen. If the news doesn't tell you that something happened, then it didn't happen. And you're right about, blogs and stuff like that. At least there was freedom of expression that couldn't be taken away. Well, you could shut down someone's social media account. You can shut down the town square. So we have no village town square. And so we will only know what they want us to know. And that's a very scary place.
Yeah.
Right. And brings us to these two bills. If we could talk a little bit about it. Bill C11 and Bill C63. Now, Bill C63, it terrifies me, but so does C11, right? Now, have they changed the name? Copyright Modernization Act, and it's like amending the Broadcasting Act, where the role of the CRTC is regulating and supervising the broadcasting system. They kind of have already, but what does that mean? They need to, I need to sort of read about it a little bit more. So that's one thing. C11 and C63, the Online Harms Act, which always talks about children, but it's not all about that. They want to monitor what is harmful content, hate speech, and they want to create a regulatory regime for social media. What the bloody hell? Oh, I lost you for a second. Yeah. Oh, yeah. See, now I don't know anything more about this other than that it's terrifying. I'll just wait for Kris to come back. But these two things, this is creating a regulatory regime for social media. No, thank you. I see, Kris, you're back. Okay, so tell me, what can you tell me about these two bills and what you think about them?
See when that happened? Sorry, I can't help it. I love me some C11 jokes.
They came for us. They literally did. They don't want you. You better say what you got to say.
I better chipmunk speed here. Okay.
Yeah.
So C11 is now law. So that was passed during the last parliamentary session, and it is slowly grinding its way through the CRTC. The CRTC is the federal government's regulatory arm for what used to be just broadcasting. So what Anita and I used to work in all the time. So television and radio. Okay. And that is connected to what you can see, hear, and say on broadcasting. Okay. So what C11 did is, I'm paraphrasing and it's all technical. What it did ostensibly is take what we're doing right now. Okay. So something that is being hosted by YouTube or Spotify or Apple iTunes, anything like that, the alternative media, okay, the online media. They took that and they said, okay, now you guys are also going to be regulated by government bureaucrats at the CRTC. Under the idea, this is the fig leaf, the excuse they used for C11 was content, Canadian content. Their argument, again, I think this was a sham argument. I think it was so obvious, but face value. They were saying, oh, we just want to promote Canadian content. So it's all going to be Anne Murray and maple syrup recipes. Trust us, wink, wink, right? The issue here is that on paper, it gives the CRTC the authority to regulate providers of podcasts for Canadian content. Now, that's a big gray area. What do they mean by Canadian content? Because famously, there's been crazy situations where SOCAN, Society of Canadian Artists and whatever, the CanCon rules, right, on how many songs you need to hear on the radio that are Canadian, etc. Bryan Adams was told he was not Canadian content because I think one of his producers was from Australia or something stupid. Like, you get into all sorts of these bureaucratic quagmires the moment you get into art and expression, which is, again, why the government should butt the hell out and not have anything to do with it. It should all be person created and individual. So this is the issue. They brought it in under this Trojan horse of Canadian content. The issue here going forward is, how will the CRTC enforce what it wants to see coming from Canadian YouTube creators or Canadians who are on Spotify creating content? How? Like, are they going to hire an army of bureaucrats to sit there and watch feeds on these different social media platforms? Don't tempt them with a good time. They'll do that in a second and we'll have to pay for it. And then also, this is what we don't yet know and what I'm digging on right now. I mean, like I said, I'm in the middle of trying to work up a report on this stuff. When push comes to shove, where's the shoving coming from? Like, what mechanism do the feds think they have when it comes to telling YouTube what it can and can't put up there? So we don't know. But I'll give you an example. Remember the link tax, like the online situation? That's why we can't see news on Facebook, because the government had this great idea of, let's wade into this. And they said, hey, Facebook, you're promoting and showing people's news content with their logos and names and everything on it. This is the silliest thing I've ever heard. How about you pay a tax for that? And Facebook was like, how about no? So that's why you can't see anything there. The risk here is it going to be worth YouTube's while or Spotify's while or Apple's while to listen to a bunch of Canadian bureaucrats over in Gatineau saying, actually, you can't have that up there because of this regulation? Like, there is a risk that they could just be like, how many listeners do we have in Canada? Yeah, no, click. It's not worth it. So this is where we're getting into some dangerous territory with C11, but it isn't fully in the regs yet. We are watching it very closely.
It did amaze me that the government said, let's have this link tax on Canadian news, and that Facebook could have just said, no, I don't think so. Let's carry on the way it is. Yep. I mean, it's funny that they listened or something, or maybe they would have to cough up, or what is in the language that Facebook had to listen to this?
No, they didn't. That's why we can't see news. Because Facebook was like, I'm taking our ball and we are going home. We won't have any Canadian news posted on our platform, like go pound sand. Google eventually played ball a little bit. And this is coming full
Sorry,
circle. And
I'm saying that they could say go pound sand and be like, we're not doing this, and continue. Could they not have just continued with people being able to share? Like, couldn't they just said, no, we don't agree with your tax. Thank you very much. We'll carry on the way that it was. I wonder.
Well, it was the media companies themselves who went running to mommy.
Oh,
it was the media companies who went running to government and said, but we want stuff. And look, it's on Facebook. Here, this is the backstory to this. And it's kind of a sad backstory when we're talking about the ridiculousness. And I say this with salty affection most of the time. Ridiculousness of Canadian media, in that it was initially the print guys, as we call them in the business. It was the print newspapers who, understandably so, were like, oh my gosh, the internet is like eating our lunch. It has disrupted our platform of how we print stuff and deliver it to people's doorsteps. I get all of that. And so the print guys, it went something like this. Okay, it's really hard for us to make money anymore because advertisers are on places like Facebook. They're on places like Google. They're no longer putting ads in the local Lethbridge newspaper, just using this as an example. Let's have it so that, like back in the day, we had broadcasting rules coming out of the United States of a certain amount of your content has to be public service. That's why we have newscasts, by the way. That we can then get some money out of these platforms in the form of kind of advertising. And what's the solution to this? Instead of figuring it out themselves, I don't know if they tried or whatever happened. Instead of figuring out themselves with these platforms, they went to government. And government was like, okay, I'll screw this up for you. And so government went forward and tried to hammer out a deal and just flubbed it. Like, government should not be in charge of organizing a 2-car parade. Like, we'll screw everything up. I think it was Milton Friedman that said, if you put the government in charge of the Sahara Desert, within 5 years, there'd be a shortage of sand. It's true. So what happened is, fast forward, it was the print guys who were initially like, yeah, our bylines matter, what we're writing matters, which is all true. We want some payment for our content. I understand what they're saying. But then here's the rub. Even now that Google is playing ball and the federal government is taking money from Google and handing it to newsrooms like this, they're a middleman. The CBC is taking a huge chunk of that money. Thank you very much. And it was the print guys. One of the problems the print guys had was that the CBC decided to just change its mandate willy-nilly and start putting online print everywhere, all the time. Their initial mandate was for broadcasting, television and radio. But they all of a sudden morphed into some online newspaper and started printing stuff all the time. And so that was really, in the print guy's opinion, cutting into their bottom line. It was eating their lunch. And you might remember this because you were in the biz back in the day. I think it was around 10 years ago, where some newspapers, understandably so, were putting up paywalls because they wanted to be paid for their work and content, which is totally their right. The CBC actually started tweeting and putting out salty little ads saying, haha, no paywall. Come read us instead, no paywall. Like mocking the Canadian print journalism. So this is a big old long tawdry mess, but that is how we got here. That is why you cannot see news on Facebook. And that is why Google is now paying some form of a tax, we don't know exactly how much, to the federal government. And the federal government is now sprinkling this amongst Canadian news companies.
It's utterly ridiculous, isn't it? And the CBC, boy, they for doing that cheeky little thing, saying no paywall here. It's like, you have all the money in the world. You have our money, and we don't want you to have it. And it is hard for an independent journalist to make a buck. And thank goodness there is things like Substack and things like that. Because if you like Sam Cooper, you subscribe to him, you'll donate, you'll pay. It's how it has to be now, because we've been deceived by the media. So there's that. Okay, well, thank you for that, because I didn't really understand the backstory on that so much. And so what are your thoughts also on the Online Harms Act? A lot of people say, oh, it's a great thing. It's online harms. We're protecting children. Right. But the language is going to be so broad that they will come to regulate you. And like you keep saying, I don't want who's going to regulate me? People that I agree with? Leave me alone. Like, who's going to be on this panel? And how is this even going to manifest? You're going to watch everybody's YouTube, or are they going to do a thing where it's like, you're a Canadian YouTuber, if you want to start a channel, you have to apply. Do you meet the criteria? Yes or no? Oh, well, you don't get a channel. Like, I really hope we don't start seeing stuff like that. Maybe I'm giving them ideas, but like, we could all get.
So
Did you think, how do you implement this nonsense with a million YouTube channels? And a lot of Canadians are doing Canadian content because we're interested right now in Canadian content. Canadian content is kind of moving our channels. I wasn't really interested in politics, even though I worked in a newsroom for a long time. I really became interested when they came for me.
if you don't take an interest in politics, politics will take an interest in you.
Yeah. And so my channel evolved that way, but I could equally just sit here and talk about lipstick all day too, but that wouldn't move either. But, like there is CanCon in the YouTubers and the Canadian YouTubers. By default, there's CanCon. So I don't know how they're going to implement this, but your Online Harms Act, what are your thoughts about that?
So to your point, the Online Harms Act is this strange chimera of a bill. So it's a couple of different animals connected together here for reasons that I think are pretty obvious. And again, I've worked on the Hill. I've been in the game for a long time. So on the face value, it's called Harms Act because there's a big element of Bill C63, which will have to be reintroduced now that there's a brand new session of Parliament, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But they've made every indication. I've heard no change from their plan. Every indication we have so far as of May 28th, okay, is that they're going to reintroduce it basically as it was prior to dissolution. So Bill C63, the element that most people would totally support is that they want to strengthen the penalties for disgusting, hideous people who share images of child sex abuse. Like, I don't know anybody who would be opposed to throwing the key away on those people. The point here that I'm trying to make as a longtime court reporter is that's already illegal. That's already big time illegal, and rightly so. Same sort of thing goes for, God forbid, if somebody was advocating acts of terrorism. Like, that is literally already on the books. Okay. Right. And if any government wanted to strengthen the penalties for those crimes, go make that its own justice bill. Like, go make it its own justice bill. The weird thing here is that this is in heritage. This is not in justice. This is coming from heritage. And there's this strange element to Bill C63 that people much smarter than me who are right into law and media and expression. So Canadian Constitution Foundation, I strongly recommend reading everything that they say about Bill C63. Christine Van Gyn, a former colleague of mine, brilliant lawyer, brilliant constitutional lawyer. It was her group that won that federal court ruling saying the Emergencies Act was unlawful. That was a huge win. So go read this group on Bill C63. They're the smart kids in class on this. But generally speaking, the element of censorship with Bill C63 goes something like this. Someone could contact the government through some form of a human rights council and say, Jane Smith on Twitter or on YouTube is going to say something hateful, offensive, phobic, whatever. You need to silence them. And then under this law, if it were passed as it's described, and again, I'm sorry for the layman's terms here, then the government would be able to fine you. But it's for something you haven't done yet.
Yeah.
So this is why people are often comparing it to like Minority Report, the Tom Cruise movie, right? Of stuff like future crime. The other element that is more, I think, more applicable here, because I just can't imagine that they would be able to do something like that for the future. But the more applicable element here that they're proposing is that anything you have said or online that is still accessible is fair game.
Oh, God.
So like 20 years ago, if you made a tweet that so-and-so anonymously, by the way, gets all offended by and says like you expose them to hate or blah, 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 you will be fined if you do not go find that tweet or that Facebook post or that YouTube video and take it down. So again, I know this sounds really far-fetched. I hope it is crazy far-fetched and it'll never happen. So I would encourage everyone who cares about free expression here, Thought Police, exactly. Thank you so much for that comment. Anybody who cares about this topic, go do deep dives on this. And I would start with the Canadian Constitution Foundation. Start reading their work because, again, those are like constitutional lawyers. They wear fancy robes and go inside court and everything.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't need this. None of us need this stuff. We
need this like a hole in the head, my friend. I know.
Yeah, exactly. We need to express ourselves. We need something after everything we've been through. We need an outlet. People need to gather. People need to comment. People need to say what they need to say. I don't need to be arrested for my past thoughts or my future thoughts. Thank you very much. Because if anybody's going to get locked up, it's going to be me. I'm pretty sure. Right? I don't need this stuff anymore. But anyway, could we end on an up note? What do we do about all this? I mean, like,
Sure.
I mean, this is, yeah.
Of course.
What can we do?
So you don't need to work on your solitaire game yet. Okay. Like you bring your deck of cards, right? I'll bring it to you in a cake. Yeah. When you're stuck in there. Okay. So the good news is we're still having this. Somebody says, I'm surprised he doesn't go back to our ancestors. I know. Okay.
That's right. Oh, you're reading these fast. Yeah. Good for you. That's right.
Right. In the biz, Thought Police. So this is so ridiculous. You're right. That hopefully it will not come to pass, but a few things need to happen here. People need to make sure that they stay engaged. So if this is something, this show that you're watching right now, if this is something that speaks to you and you want to get your family and friends or whoever involved, share it with them. Okay. Get a little card together of things that you care about. So something, I don't know, it could be the industrial carbon tax. It could be defunding the media. It could be getting rid of the censorship. Okay. Make up little print cards. Door knock. I'm not kidding. Door knock. Get people engaged in this because right now our best power is what we're doing right now. So it's citizen activism. It's grassroots activism. Hold those meetings, knock on those doors, write those letters to the editor, phone in to talk radio live, like push back, team up and push back. And the key here on censorship, if I can give somebody a like pro tip, keep the opposition on this like a dog on a bone. Because the Conservatives up to the election were promising to get rid of all of these online censorship laws. Okay. They have not formed government. Right now, they're going back to their binders, okay, and they're figuring out what they want to focus on because they only have a certain amount of resources and people time and all that stuff, right? What do we want to focus on right now, guys? You tell the Conservatives, you tell everybody in Parliament, you tell the opposition to stay on this topic. Tell them it matters to you. Tell them this is a voting issue for you, that you expect them to stand up and fight against censorship every single day they are in Parliament to speak. They're literally paid to speak, to parlay for you. So get real close with your local member of Parliament. I'm not kidding. And make sure they know that censorship, getting rid of censorship, should be top of the list. That's what folks need to do.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent advice. That's excellent. That is absolutely the right lot. That's the thing to do. That's what we can do. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kris Sims, thank you so much for spending this hour with me. And I really enjoyed it. And I hope that you'll come back again. And to anyone who's watching right now, if you like spending time with us, please like and subscribe. And thank you for saying share this out. There's a lot of good information in here, and hopefully you found it entertaining. Thank you for all the people. There are still people watching right now, but we're gonna wrap it up. We won't take up too much of your time. Thank you for spending time with me this evening, and we'll catch you all again next Wednesday. Okay,
it was a
Wednesday,
treat. Thank you.
Wednesday live at 5. Thank you, Kris Sims, and thank you all for watching. Take care. Night.